An oftentimes tragic incident can be hard, and doing it time and time again can take a toll on your mental health. This afternoon we have Al Eskenazi, founder of the Community Police Relations Foundation, with us to talk more about the importance of prioritizing mental health, especially for those in law enforcement. Al, thanks for joining us. It's a frightening rate of depression, isn't it, right now with cops?
Well, thank you for having us. We appreciate being here. So, we're speaking about law enforcement officers, and what people do not realize is that the officer walking around, a male or female, doesn't matter, are people who have been exposed to traumatic situations over and over again. It's not a one-off circumstance. So as a result of that, over a path of weeks, years, a career, that builds, that trauma builds. And what are we supposed to do? We have to get rid of the trauma somehow. And we have begun a program along with, it's the BoulderCrestFoundation.org. It's the veterans program, actually, for post-traumatic stress disorders, as we say. But we believe in post-traumatic growth. Therefore, any disorder can be treated if it's treated well and in advance. And that's what we do.
Now, a lot of times the cops have a military background, and of course we talk a lot about PTSD from our soldiers coming back from overseas, but a lot of times this PTSD carries over into the job, and it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and you go down the alcohol abuse line, even suicide at some point. I was talking to the police chief here a few years ago after a policeman had taken his life, and he says, my God, I just wish these people would just get some help. But there's such a stigma about asking for help or going through the case about how can we turn that around?
Well, the society is part of the issue of post-traumatic stress. Imagine being a law enforcement officer. You see all these terrible, terrible events throughout the course of your career, and you run toward the event. You don't run away. So you're running toward the gunshot. A firefighter is running toward the fire, and yet they do what they do. And society in the last several years has kind of, discounted all of that. So we all in society, we have a societal obligation to support our law enforcement officers and our first responders. And if society would just start, smiling, say hello, appreciate what's going on and what these officers go through. Can you imagine being an officer in a car? You respond to a domestic violence call at 2:30 a.m., a real situation. You subdue the subject, and on the floor is a woman bleeding, a baby bleeding, and all of a sudden you're there. You're there, and how do you now deal with this as a human being? It's not a one-off circumstance either in many neighborhoods. So Boulder Crest Foundation is coming with a program, post-traumatic growth. It's not a one-day program. Imagine chiefs can't give up officers when they're short-staffed as it is, and yet they're giving us the officers for 5 days. We've put 6,000 officers through the Boulder Crest Foundation program. It's a 5-day program dealing with this, and we find it starts on a Monday. We find by Thursday it's very cathartic. Officers are telling us, they never said this before. They were contemplating suicide. They were divorcing. They were separating from their children. They were drinking. They were otherwise. And now we're bringing them back to healing process through the Boulder Crest Foundation.
And of course, they see the worst of the worst. I mean, yes, they do the accidents and the shootings and things like that. They have to make split-second decisions. And if they make a wrong decision, for example, the cop a few years ago that pulled out what she thought was her taser, and it was her gun, and she ends up shooting and killing a guy. I mean, these split-second decisions, and they can mark you for the rest of your life, either ruin your career, ruin your life, or make you financially just destroyed.
Even if the decision was not, how shall I say, adjudicated, that it was a fault of the officer, that officer still has to live with that decision. Very, very difficult to do that. So society can help. If we, again, I say, if we just stop with the defund police and we stop with the hatred, and let's come back as a society. Our country today needs us to come back as one people, Americans. And that's just the way I see it.
Yeah, I think we saw that when we had the defund the police, and we saw that as not a good solution. A lot of neighborhoods that were victims of this can tell you, no, we don't want to do that. We want to make sure we back the blue.
So I'm in the most distressed neighborhoods wherever I am, whether it's New York City or South Florida or Chicago, wherever I go. It's only the distressed cities. And we do events. We'll hold we'll hold community events where we're doing barbecues, giving out bicycles, clothing, winter clothing, and it's all through the view of the officer. So when we gave out 2,000 $50 supermarket cards during COVID, it was an officer knocking on the door, handing out a $50 grocery card. When we do 3,000 turkeys for Thanksgiving, every turkey is handed out by the uniformed officer. It's another opportunity for people to get to know the person that is there to protect them and work with them. So chiefs and command staffs, they've come a long way in these last 3 to 5 years, a very long way. And I commend them for doing so. They're very sympathetic to what an officer goes through now. And the bravado, I can't show that I have an emotional issue. That bravado is now, how shall I say, it's being dealt with in a sensitive way. You're a human being, you can speak, let us know when there's a problem. We just began October 1st, after 36 months, 6,000 officers. We just began a peer-to-peer program. A peer is an officer that's been through our course several times, has a certification on being a peer, if you will. And at 2:30 in the morning, when that officer saw that site that I just explained, he now or she now has an opportunity to call a peer officer. Within an hour, that peer officer will be there. Let's deal with the trauma at the point of trauma, not 6 months or a year later when it builds. And that's our newest program through Boulder Crest Foundation.
A lot to think about there. Al Eskenazi, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.